Right, and I'll be doing all those links while Sechari is just relaxing after spending 5 minutes editing the video, so...
5 minutes. Just takes 5 minutes to edit this thing. Get it out there. Hey.
Disparate Worlds, where an irresistible force meets an immovable object. I'm Mox, and this is Sechari, and we're comparing and contrasting the worlds of Pantheon, Rise of the Fallen, and Ashes of Creation.
Yes, indeed. Hello, and welcome to you, our friends. Good to have you with us, as always. We are going to do something with this episode that we have been threatening to do, my friend Mox.
On your marks.
On your marks.
Get set.
Get set. We're off to the...
Go.
Races.
There we go.
It ain't easy being cheesy.
So yes, races this episode. We're going to get into the races of Pantheon. We're going to do this, and it's going to be great. So stay tuned for that. We'll visit the news first.
Yes, and in Pantheon news, November 18th was a day of memorial as the 1 year anniversary of the passing of Brad McQuaid. Passed by. So Aradune is sorely missed in the Pantheon world for sure. On some more happy news, David Nefel Beach, game designer, or new associate game designer, I should say, has been hired by Visionary Realms, and understanding that he is going to focus on crafting, harvesting, and the economy. And as a matter of fact, he happened to even be on the Terminus Tavern, talking about those very topics, crafting, gathering, housing, things of that nature, and kind of what he would do and such. This was all like before he got officially hired, or at least the announcement was made, so that was kind of neat. So we will have a link to that as well in our description, so please check that out. The next developer live stream will be on December 3rd. It is earlier in the month than normal, a departure due to the holidays, so keep an eye out for that. Both the December and January episodes will be earlier in the month, and then I presume they will go back to a more regular schedule. In addition to that, the Developer Roundtable series wrap-up for 2020 will be at the end of November. So they'll pick up in January, taking December off for the holidays. And lastly, the monthly newsletter came out, and in there, they dared to mention the alpha proper testing phase. Mm-hmm. So keep your eyes out for a date for that. I hope it will be coming sometime in the beginning of next year, where we'll have some dates for that to be occurring.
Yes, friends, can you tell that we are flying through these news items? There's a stack of news that's happened over the last couple of weeks. And we are trying to, it almost feels like we're at the races ourselves trying to get through these things because we really want to get to this discussion this episode. So, Ashes news. The first thing, minor thing, Harvest Dawn, the cosmetic set, is now live in the Ashes shop. Go check that out. Link below, of course. Another thing, Stephen Sharif appeared on the Ashes Pathfinders podcast with Samurg and friends. So, very cool there. Congratulations, guys, on your 100th episode. A link down below as well on that as well. Very cool. The next developer update that they mentioned is going to be on November 30th, so mark your calendars for that. And then probably the coolest thing that Intrepid has been up to was their 24-hour live stream that they did this year for Extra Live. They put out a highlight reel of the thing, so we're going to link that as well. The casualty this year was Steven's beard. The poor guy.
Yes, at about $1 per beard hair.
Yes, $1 per... Assuming he has exactly 88,500 and something beard hairs.
Exactly.
Yes, they did so well, raising money for Rady Children's Hospital. So congratulations on that, guys. That is incredible. I think they set 30,000 as the limit for the loss of the beard, and they did not expect that he was going to do that. And they blew that out of the water. So very cool, and that's good to see, for sure. Mox, you took part in Extra Life 2 this year. How did that go for you?
It went great. We had our group from part of our group, our guild from Star Wars: The Old Republic, decided to carry on our tradition of participating in Extra Life. We've been participating for about 7 years now and have raised in excess of $15,000 over that time, which is great for our small little community. And we got together, played some Civilization 6, introduced actually a couple of our group to the idea of turn-based strategy games, and had a ball doing it and raised some money. The link to my page for Extra Life will be in the description, so please, if you're able to, make a donation. As Sechari mentioned, it does go through the end of the year, so if you're able to, help out.
Awesome. That is it for the news, my friends. Okay, so let's get into the topic for this episode. I wanted to just touch briefly on our plan for the next 3 episodes, assuming there's nothing huge that happens and we need to cover the news.
Yes, my heart is racing.
Yes, indeed. There's a lot of racing going on this episode. So, episode 5, namely this one, we're going to do a deep dive on Pantheon's races. I wanted to just kind of get in and not be competing with Ashes so much this episode. So we'll do that. We'll cover that exclusively. Nice deep dive. The next episode, we'll do the opposite. So we'll do this for Ashes of Creation. A deep dive on its races, take a good look, ask some hard questions. And then episode 7 is going to be the fun one. We're going to compare the two. We're going to have a friendly competition. And have some categories and throw them out there, and then rate both of these in terms of those categories and just see how all of that shakes out. So stay tuned and we'll make all of that happen. Again, pending nothing huge that happens, because obviously we want to cover the news and make that number 1. So that will be the plan. Now, for this episode, it is important to us to ask essentially 2 questions. The first one is, what constitutes a race in an MMO RPG? There's more to race than just, hey, here's a guy with a funny color skin. You've got to build the world around it. So if you think, obviously the aesthetic, right? How they look, the shape of their ears, how big their eyebrows are, the models, the player models do matter. That deserves some consideration. Style is another thing. A race is going to dress in certain ways. They're going to wear certain armor, certain clothing. They're going to have a proclivity for something. That deserves some consideration too. Well, what about the character of that race? What is its personality? Is there a personality for that race? So we'll give some consideration to that. Things like architecture, right? Because a race is going to have its style and its look. Is there architecture? What about their history? You can't have just a red guy or a blue guy. There's some history there that makes that race meaningful in the world. So we're going to get into history, things like religion, lore. There are a lot of layers to this onion that we need to make sure we're considering in this. So question number 1, what constitutes a race in terms of those subcategories?
I was going to say, some of that stuff we're going to have information on. Some of it we won't. And part of that will be are they giving us enough information on that stuff? Or is it stuff that we need to wait to sort out? So,
yes,
some of the stuff will be, I don't know. And that'll be perfectly okay for our purposes here.
Well, I need Pantheon not to do so well in some of these categories so that our next episode... So stay tuned.
Yeah.
So the question number 2 then is, how well is Pantheon doing in terms of all of this, right? So it's not enough just to say, we care about the implementation. So we're going to be linking some things. As always, we're not trying to do an information dump here for you. This has been covered extensively by other people, and so we're going to send you their way and support our fellow content creators in things that they do wherever possible. For this episode, what we're going to do is link part 1 and part 2 of a series, like a 2-part series that Chris Joppa Perkins put out there I think last year around this time, breaking down the racial passives, but also kind of touching on the personality of each race. That's very cool videos. We highly recommend. If you care just to kind of get the lay of the land, that's where I would go for sure. Now, if you care to do an epic deep dive, we're going to link every one of the races' wiki page. And so if you really care about the humans or the halflings or the Archai, you can actually go to its wiki page and read extensively. And that's really the deep dive. Those of you that really care about the lore, really care about the history, you can get all of the information that you need from there.
Right, and I'll be doing all those links while Sechari is just relaxing after spending 5 minutes editing the video, so...
5 minutes. Just takes 5 minutes to edit this thing. Get it out there, hey. Yes, so stay tuned. All of those things will be in the description.
They will.
All right, so here we go.
Here we go.
Here we go. All right, so we're now running the race, my friend.
Yeah.
So we want to touch on some things. Again, I laid out some ideas as to what constitutes a race, right? The aesthetic, the style, the character, the history, the religion, all of those things.
Right.
The question, my friend Mox, is how well is Visionary Realms doing with regard to the races that we've read about in Pantheon? How well are they doing in terms of these categories?
Well, it's a 10, of course. Discussion's over, right?
Well, I am going to force you, my friend, to justify yourself.
All right. So I don't really think that it's a 10. I do think that there's a couple, places where more information could be given, or things could be a little bit better. We're starting off with 9 races, first of all. To expect everyone to be a 10 out of 10 would be a bit unrealistic. Plus, that a lot of that is going to go into just your own personal proclivities. Like, I don't like elves, like, maybe. Not saying that I don't like
you
elves,
racist.
but maybe a player doesn't. Right? Yeah, exactly. They're MMO racists, I guess. But certain players may not like elves. Certain players may not like gnomes or dwarves or whatever the case is. They just don't care for them. So, in looking at that, having a broad selection though almost guarantees that you'll find something that you'll like.
Yes, absolutely.
So as far as aesthetics are concerned, they have a broad. They have a smorgasbord, if you will,
of choices.
Yes,
of choices.
They have a buffet, a Thanksgiving buffet of choices. You can't deny that.
Yes, no, that's
they
absolutely
look different.
True.
They're all distinctly different. There isn't many that like really even are close to looking, like, oh, that's just like a blue human. Or that's or a green human. They're all distinctly different in size and like their clothing and things that they're wearing. So I think that as far as that is concerned, style and those things, I think they're doing very well in what they're offering is diverse.
Yes. So with regard to the models, real quick, because what you say triggered something for me. I'm thinking in terms of Guild Wars 2 now, where you have a race that is essentially runs on all fours, right? These are all humanoids. Does that deserve something? Is there a place, I think, for maybe a race that it doesn't follow a humanoid type of a model, character model?
You're talking about like having like a blob race or a animal race?
Yeah.
I mean, sure, there's always room for more stuff, especially in a fantasy realm. You
Right.
can always, expand it to include other things. I think part of the draw of an MMO, though, is that you are taking on this personality, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So in taking on the personality, you just tend to want to have stuff that you can identify with better, if that makes sense. So having more humanoid things, I think, is probably the reason for that. And again, as humans, we see sentient life as two-legged and two-armed with 5 fingers and an opposable thumb.
Right. An opposable thumb. How dare you?
I know, right? I'm a thumbist.
Yes. Yeah, no kidding. I mean, your player models are a little bit selective, my friend. So I have observed that there is a human tendency when in playing MMOs that we tend to generally to stick to races that closely resemble humans. Every MMO I've ever played, even they come up with a really new race, and hey, this one looks really fantastic, and everyone's excited to have a new race. Well,
but when you boil it down, other than maybe some additional like head appendages or something, they're humans.
Yeah, they're going to be close. Now, the further you get from humans or human-looking type of things, everyone's like, "Yay, this is a new race." But then some months down the line, they become very few and far between, and very few people actually roll those races. And so, I think that there is a psychology that we need to be thinking about in this, and that's that maybe we as humans are going to want to play things that are close to us. This is why elves are popular. This is why dwarves are popular. They're very human-ish, even though there's some distinctions and they're very well understood. You get to things like gnomes that, when you look at the lore for this, they resemble humans in that that's the form that they take, but they're actually formless if you go look at their lore. So what does that look like?
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see if we actually see them in their natural form, or do we see them in the form that they present themselves to the other races of Terminus.
Yes. And so, there's I think layers to this that are quite fascinating. Very, very cool.
Yeah. So moving on. It's hard to say if we don't know much about the character of each of the races. Like, we know a little bit of their lore. Some of them were oppressed in their at their previous planet before coming to Terminus, so they revolted. So you can impose some thoughts about like what that will mean. That they will be potentially stoic or maybe standoffish to another race that might be seen as more dominant potentially. So they may shy away from that race, but it's difficult to say without seeing your character walk up to another character of that race, and how does that how do they what's the dialogue like? We don't know. So we could say that the gnomes and the orcs are going to get along, but maybe they don't. I don't know.
With interracial relations, right? Like, how do they relate to one another when they stumble across each other in a village square, for instance? I think that's a complicated topic. But I think I would beg to differ a little bit on that. We don't have much on their character. That was probably one of the things I was impressed the most as I was researching and trying to bring myself up to speed, so that I at least sound somewhat coherent in this episode. Take the scar, for instance. Right. One of the things that Joppa mentioned is that they when they designed that race, they were thinking raptors. That's what they had in mind. That conjures an image. That race, they don't have very much really with regard to history and lore and culture. They're a swarming, angry, just destructive, warlike species that just wants to kill everything. But that's very strong in the character. It may be weak in the if I can't talk about what is Scar architecture like, but I can certainly talk about what their character is like. That's very well known. So I think
I more so was meaning like how they're gonna intermingle as opposed to how they are individually.
Yes, and actually that was one of the things as I was reading that I think was a bit of a weak point in general. The only real example that I saw in the lore and in the history of these races of where, and I granted I'm limited and I may not be thinking of some things or may have missed some details, but the only case that I saw in lore where one race had to have interacted with another was in the humans, where they showed up and it felt very much like Europeans settling the New World for the first time. They ended up destitute and struggling, and the humans had to depend on the elves of Fairthale to kind of bail them out. That was a good example. But by and large, not really much with regard to races and their history together. Right. It was more siloed, where each race was mentioned on its own.
Right, and it'll be interesting to see if in the time period of the release of the vanilla game versus some sort of expansion, are we coming in like when Terminus is kind of at its infancy of exploration? Are these races just getting to know each other and just really discovering each other even potentially?
Yes.
So all that stuff is yet to be seen. Like, kind of how will that initial time frame go? Because that's how MMOs go. You have your time frame of vanilla. Then when an expansion comes out, usually something happens or some event, an event occurs or a big baddie comes and invades, so that the races either have to like get together to bind together to defeat it. So what's this vanilla time period like? What's going to happen there?
Yeah, and I think
but
it's true. You've got to have a catalyst. I'm thinking of a recent D&D campaign that you and I have been doing. You know, you have to start the story somewhere. So you put everyone in a tavern, and everyone has to have in their backstory, well, what are they doing at the tavern? And now it's like, okay, go. Well, what's the catalyst? Why would these people start to interact with each other in order to form a group that then becomes a story? That's going to be a challenge here. And one of the things that I was reading in the lore was that a lot of them arrived, quote unquote, on Terminus. They have other worlds that they came from or very diverse backgrounds from out there somewhere. And now suddenly they're all on Terminus. What brought them here? And I think that those are questions I'm going to be asking with the launch of this game. What brought them here, and what is the catalyst for the interaction with each other? And you know, and why now? Why is it now suddenly you have 9 different races that show up on this world that were all here for a reason? And is that a part of the story? Is there something that drew them here together? And now, you know, there you have your catalyst for the races interacting with each other.
Exactly. And, you know, carrying on with that idea of 9 races, is 9 too much? You know, at launch you have 9 races. Is that too many, or is it the right amount? And you know, if you have 9 here, like where do you bring them in? Like in the future, like if you have an expansion, generally expansions, you know, historically MMO expansions involve new races, new classes, like all the new areas to explore. Like those are the 3 big hallmarks of an expansion. So are you already limiting yourself in that first expansion of, you know, we already have 9 races, we're not ready to have 11.
Yes.
You know, because
when
you know, we want to bring in
such a smorgasbord. Right. What is one more dish? One more option? Well, we've already got a smorgasbord. It doesn't matter so much. So in terms of that, is 9 too many to start? I don't know. It's certainly gonna. I will say this. It's certainly gonna be the best fertile soil for a lot of story, because you're gonna get a lot of this race bumps into that race. This race takes over this territory. Then this other race comes in and makes it complicated, or another race shows up to try to smooth things out. This is a lore machine. I mean, we're gonna have so much history out of this. But then the challenge is later on bringing anything new in.
Bringing that 10th and or 11th race in with the first expansion. If they're going to do that, you have to have you have to hit a home run with those then, because you've already you've got 9 strong ones, I guess it's debatable if there's 9 strong ones. I know you mentioned that in reading about them and researching the orcs, you felt they were a little on the flat side, and I would have to agree with that. So
ogres.
Or ogres, so say orcs, ogres. So you have, but you still have, out of the 9, the majority of them are going to be good. So when you bring something else in, you can't go under that benchmark. You have to exceed it.
And sometimes you can do that with something that upsets the balance. You know, 2 years in, there's some kind of a balance. Everybody has their territory. There's relations set up. There's trade set up. You have a world, and it's kind of going, even if it's not perfect. Then something awful shows up, and it just rains from the sky and becomes this force that all of them now have to unite, maybe, to go fight. And so that's I think if you make it a nice big splash, you can make that work. So I think execution.
Like World of Warcraft did with Cataclysm, like where they actually rendered the world.
Yes, and that was actually what I had in mind. But I've not played WoW. Look at my history in the previous, so I don't want to talk without knowing. But yes, I was aware that had happened, and absolutely, I think how you execute, how you bring another race in. If it's just, oh, by the way, these guys showed up now, that's gonna fail in this.
And they're green humans.
Yes. Oh, yeah, green is another option. So, within 2 months, nobody's playing them. But if they come in and they've got an amazing lore and they make a splash on the world, and you can't ignore their existence, and they're cool, I think that's going to make people want to play them, a lot.
Absolutely. So the final thing we wanted to talk about as far as the races are concerned is something that some people find a bit controversial, and that is the restriction of classes by race. And I know that you initially had mentioned that this was something that you did not like, and I was actually all for it, although with some expansions, like some of the classes are a little too restricted, but in general, I think this is a good idea because this is a way of forcing diversity.
Yes, and that's actually the thought that is bringing me around in that. I don't like that if I want to be a paladin, I have to be this guy. If I want to play with my friend who wants to be an enchanter, it may be that I have to now start with this race, and he has to start with that race, and we're on other sides of the continent, and we're not going to see each other for a while. Right. Especially in this kind of an MMO where you have to work together with friends to get anywhere, I may not be able to play with my friend. So
for a week or two or a month.
Yes, and so that's what's bothering me a little bit about pairing classes and races as they have in this. But what's bringing me around, on the other hand, is what we already mentioned, that humans like to play human-looking things. And the more unhuman it is, the less you're likely to see that. Well, if I want to play a certain class, I am forced to roll one of the races that I may not have picked up.
Right.
And I like that. They've kind of leveraged the class system to bolster the race diversity. And I like that. I think that's cool, but again, there's pros and cons to that.
But it's on the devs to make sure that people aren't stranded without their friends to play with for too long.
Right.
Some minor inconvenience is understandable. I have to get up to level 5 before we can go and adventure the same area, or, depending on how long it takes, maybe level 10. But anything above that, really, and you're forcing somebody to play a race they don't want to play necessarily to level up with their friend, and then they switch roles. Then they both go over to starting area B and start classes together, level up until their two main characters can get together, and that's less elegant of a solution.
Yes, and there's a challenge as well in that you have to have a diversity to go do things in the world. Well, if I'm here and I'm a human and I start here with other humans, we're limited to a select amount of classes that limits my options to be able to deal with the world effectively, because I don't have the diversity in classes, because I'm here a human among humans and we're limited in classes. So I think that this is going to force them to have to make it so that the races can begin to intermingle very quickly. And how they do that, that's going to matter as well. Obviously,
especially
in the context
because you have two continents. You got two continents you're dealing with. I remember in other games, even in EverQuest, that you'd make that level 1 run, and it didn't matter so much if you died because you had nothing. So running along at level 1, you have no experience to lose or whatever. So you would make the run to the boat, and then you'd get on the boat and go over to the other continent, and then you could play in the human area. Or in World of Warcraft, you'd make the run as a gnome up to the human area, and it was long and dangerous, but again, it ultimately didn't matter. It was just inconvenient. I hope it's not like that. I hope the solution is something that gets you to a point where you can be together quickly and doesn't it just isn't too complicated.
Maybe some kind of a robust travel system or something, right? Where for cobble together a little bit of gold, you can move to that through some kind of a phase gate, right? Or
the other
blimp
option is
system or something.
Have a small starting area on the other continent that like a small enclave of your race is on that other continent, and you can start there and move into the main questing area pretty quickly.
Yes. So I think those are things we're going to be watching for definitely as they begin to implement this. We have questions that we are asking, and I think some of these are hard questions. That are going to need good answers for it to score points, and so we'll definitely be watching for those in the future.
Right. So all in all, to answer the rating question at the beginning, so it might not be a 10, but it might be like a 9.85.
Oh, you've downgraded. I've knocked you down a peg, have I?
Yes, you have. Just a peg, though.
Just one peg, not many pegs. All right, so very good. I'm excited about the races here in Pantheon. I think this is going to be very cool. Our promotion for this episode, we wanted to take a second to talk about the comments that have been showing up on our videos. We read absolutely every one of them. I know I do, and I'm not as good as Mox at responding, but I do read them. I do make sure that I am in tune with what you guys are saying. I wanted to call out some of you. You guys have been really just doing an excellent job. Papa da Bear has been killing it with our Comquest answers. I mean, like, he's been just like, there was one where within just a couple hours or something, I think this is probably last episode.
Yeah.
He got it. And it was just like, okay, well, I guess that episode is done. So you just hole-in-one that one, and it was just done.
I actually commented to you in our Discord that I probably shouldn't have pinned him quite so quickly because it may have killed some comments and thus killed our engagement numbers. So I will learn for next time to wait a little bit of time for that stuff.
No, he got it. He answered the question. I think he deserves the prize for sure. So first one out the gate that's got it wins, and those are the rules. So congratulations, Papa da Bear. I think you've been pinned a couple times already, so very cool. Archangel223, my friend. Good to have you along. Like, some of the most thoughtful and engaging conversation. I mean, like, he'll write like 3 or 4 paragraphs of just unpacking this, and is very interested in both games. It's very, very cool to have him along for the ride for sure.
And he's bringing up games I've never even heard of, so
right.
that's pretty cool.
I'm like, this guy's got some diverse experience. So very cool. And then I also wanted to mention on episode 2, it was really cool. Joppa dropped by. He was like, hey guys, I like the concept of your show. Keep this up. It's going to be very cool. That was amazing to me. I was like, that's such a win to actually like have, the creative lead,
right?
Show up and just kind of give you a thumbs up. Very cool. And Basgrim, of course, had commented on episode 2 as well. So thank you, Baz. We appreciate that, the chatting with you behind the scenes that we've been able to do, and looking forward to getting to know you more as we go as well.
So speaking of Comquest, the answer to last week's Comquest was Gnome, and as mentioned, Papa da Bear nailed it early on.
Done.
He did mention that Gnome is the right one. So
Gnomes are cool, guys. Having read this stuff, I can understand why Mox wants to play a gnome.
I'm generally not a gnome fan. Like, the gnomes in WoW were kind of lame, and the gnomes in EverQuest were just kind of ugly, to be honest with you.
They're usually little short people that like trinkets. That's what when I talk about a gnome, that's what I think. But these guys are almost spiritual. The way that
this ain't your mama's gnome.
Oh yeah, I mean, very, very different. So check out the wiki on that for sure.
For sure. So this week's Comquest is which Pantheon race was inspired by the Chiss of Star Wars lore? So if you are the first one to get the correct answer, you will get pinned.
Good luck. This one's a little tougher than some of the ones we've done previously.
Will involve a little bit of research, so... please check us out on all of our social media. We can be found at facebook.com/Disparate Worlds, on Twitter @Disparate Worlds, and our website is disparateworlds.org. In addition, on our website and in the description of this video is a link to our Discord. Please join us there, and we'd love to chat with you about both games.
Definitely. Good to have you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Much appreciated. That will, of course, be it for us for this episode. Thank you for watching for sure. Definitely, please drop a comment. Don't forget to like, do the subscription thing. That would be great. Hit the notification bell. That way you don't miss anything else that we do on this channel. All of that said, take care of yourselves, our friends. And remember always to be immovable in your principles and irresistible